The views expressed here are those of the authors and do not in any way represent the views of Sophia TV.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another edition of Ladies First. I'm joined here by Sarah Russell and Nishat. Assalamu alaikum, ladies.
Wa alaikum salam.
So recently, the winner of the Great British Bake Off, Nadia Hussain, I think her name was, did state to everybody that she had an arranged marriage at 19 years old, I believe, and she met her husband for the first time on her wedding day. My question, and she also stated it was the most miserable day of her life. But she's happily married now, alhamdulillah. My question to you ladies is, are arranged marriages really bad? And what do we mean by arranged marriages? Nishat?
Okay, the first question, I don't think they're bad. I have seen many arranged marriages work, and typically what Nadia said, that although it might have been the first few days are like they might feel like the worst, but I think you grow together, you find out more about each other in the halal way, in the nikah, and I think you start loving them with their faults.
Okay, so do you think it's okay?
But having
positive thing.
That's the positive thing, yeah. But I also think that I think the people involved in a marriage should be given the chance to, have some sort of communication amongst them before they get into that.
So what if someone
commitment.
turned around and said, I don't want to be in an arranged marriage? Is that a bad thing?
I don't think it's a bad thing.
How would the families take to that?
Arranged marriages are obviously clearly arranged, so there's no choices there, is it? Or is this?
No,
is
it's not forced. It's
right.
just arranged.
Yeah, just the arranged meeting.
And I think like the concept of arranged marriages has moved to the West now, where you've got these dating agencies. You give them your requirements and what you want, like matrimony agencies, and they find you a partner. You go and you get to know each other and things, and then the intention is it leads to a marriage. So that is like the modern version of our traditional arranged marriages. To be honest, I'm not against arranged marriages. I think before, maybe when I was younger, I was, but the more I've kind of experienced different things, and a lot of the time when you meet someone and that like infatuation and the butterflies and stuff happen, it kind of clouds your judgment. But if you've got someone who maybe knows what you want and knows you, like your mom and things, they can sometimes know you better than you know yourself. So when they look for like a potential partner for you, it kind of takes the stress off you, like the responsibility and the stress off you, because they're using their judgment and their knowledge of you and the person, the partner. So.
But on the flip side, what your parents want for you or think is good for you might necessarily
That's what I was going to say, that we say arranged marriages are not forced marriages, but eventually they are what our parents want for us. Not eventually, but more often than not, it's what our parents want for us, and we all go by what they want for us and done in the traditional way.
But is that because you don't want to let your parents down, or you don't want to be the first one to change like a cultural phenomena, or what is it? Or because you really do trust their judgment, and your parents being happy means that God will be happy with you? Where does that come from?
I think it's about everything together, a bit of everything together. And also I think because you don't have anyone if you don't have anyone in mind, and going out with somebody in a non-halal way or anything, then you think, this is an opportunity, there's a man there waiting, willing, my parents are happy. And
well, should she marry the first thing that is out there? I mean, you said not having an opportunity, but you're at majlises, like in Iran, for example, there's a lot of meetings, social meetings, and such's son or daughter might be there, and they may think, oh, that person's really would suit my. So you have avenues where you get to meet people. Majlises, for example, you can see somebody.
Potential introduction. I think I think there's difference between introducing couples than actually arranging a marriage, because there is you were mentioning, Sarah, about the fact that arranged marriages are just an introduction. If it is that case, then that's possibly, it is an option. Obviously, not an option. Sometimes it's actually the only thing. There is no option actually. Sometimes. So that, like you mentioned, Nishat, there's that You can't really, you just deal with what you have, and you kind of then just live with that because you had no option.
But are you the same person, say at 18? You're not the same person at 18 than you are at 21. So if you've married someone at 18 and you're still changing and getting to know yourself, this is what a lot of people in the West might say, well,
But you can say that with love or non-arranged marriages. If you know you see somebody, you go out with them, you like them, you love them, you get married. 2 years later, you're not the same person again. Then what?
I
Move on to the next one.
I think that's the
Just
problem
joking.
with arranged marriages. You have the backing of the family. You have the support of your possibly your own family and your spouse's family. So even if the situation happens where you fall out of love, you still have strength in your marriage. Whereas with like typical Western, I'll call them Western marriages or love marriages, the main focus of the marriage is the love. So that when that does go, when it does die down after like a year or however long it takes, you've got nothing else. You know, you're ending up having the routine and stuff, and that's where so many divorces now happen because the spark is gone. There's no willingness to work on it and think that maybe love is not the important factor in a marriage. It's the fact that we've made
love is very important in a marriage. It's just start understanding. I think people mistake lust and love, but then actually it's important. The infatuation, but actually it's very important at the beginning that the two people really like each other, because love comes within marriage. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you know, He puts the love in the heart of the believers. So those who are connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah has guaranteed that, you know, that they will know of love. Like, love is very important. You can't fall out of love.
I think
you probably neglect your
marriage.
In
the marriage, in the beginning, it's there because that's what God says. He puts it there. But then, maybe my understanding of love is wrong. But I feel that after a while, that initial, feeling of everything's perfect and the luckiest person in the world and blah, all that stuff, it goes. So then you feel like that amazing feeling goes, so the marriage is destroyed basically, and you know we need to move on.
That is the case with everything, Sarah. Though, you know, you go to a new job, you're excited, you love it, you want to do more, and 2 or 3 years down, you think, oh, do I have to wake up early in the morning and do it? You know, so I think that's with everything: marriages, love, marriages, arranged marriages, non-arranged, whatever.
I don't know if you can make that comparison though, because you can change your job, but should you change your wife or husband?
But I mean,
it's the feeling.
My point is, with arranged marriage, you don't have that infatuation in the beginning. You don't have all the butterflies and all that feeling of, oh my God, I've hit the jackpot and, you know, I found the love of my life. You just have maybe persuasion from the family and, you know.
I think it's really important to define to people who may not know anything about arranged marriage what we mean, because arranged marriages, different things in different cultures.
Yes.
Like you said, an arranged marriage could be an introduction with the prospect of marriage later. In other cases, an arranged marriage may be, I've told you, I've found someone, this is who you're going to marry, and the wedding's next week. Other situations, you have no say if you don't go through with it, and marriages for life, honour killings and stuff. And arranged marriages can be done through friends as well. There's people that, you know, somebody's brother, they think that you would suit them. So it's not this village mentality that I'm going to clobber you with a baton and put you over my shoulder and take you. In some places that is the case, but generally I think I like to think in arranged marriages people genuinely looking for your best interest. But we were talking about it earlier that with the parents thing, I think you were saying there's no way I would take my mum's advice on getting married. And I've said this before, the kind of person she would want me to marry is somebody probably toiled off the land. There's no way you're seeing me on the farm.
Sometimes they're never good enough.
Toiling on, where's the hairdryer? But it's not someone who she would envisage for me. I would be like, no, you really have no idea. Maybe for yourself, but that's not something that I would do. I would trust. And I'm not saying it's because she didn't know me. Of course she does know me and stuff, but her idea of what a marriage should be and my idea are completely different things. So,
but that's different to choosing a spouse, though, isn't it? You know, idea of a marriage can be different, but choosing a spouse.
Well, the spouse was somebody who toiled off the land. I wasn't marrying a farmer. Can you imagine me in a truck with wellies on? It's not going to happen.
I'm trying to visualise that right now.
Exactly, but the point is, you know, I would trust somebody else, like a friend who knew me better. Like you, my mum would see me
But
one
that's going
dimension.
to say that your family or your mom or dad or whoever do not know you as well as you.
Well, I'm sorry, there's some sides you don't necessarily show your parents, and I'm not saying it in a bad way, but what they may think, they may see someone as being 30 years older than you and being established, because it's important to them. They know how important it is to have that security.
Can you not have, if I
right
gave
now.
you that question, could you not have, for example, they chose a farmer for you, right? Could you not have what you
I'm not
think
even
you
talking
could have?
to you.
Look, we're living
as a farmer
in the West
brilliant.
right now and all over now. I think things are changing, they're shifting, because now we're finding an increase that actually more people are finding a sort of a compatible spouse, whether it's in the workplace, university. And I've seen this a lot as myself. You know, my profession is a lot around this. I work a lot with a lot of married couples as such. I see a lot of married couples who actually, when you hear their story of how they met, it is a lot of the time through whether they went to school together, then they went to uni, and then they asked their parents, actually, look, I really like this girl. So they're choosing themselves, and they're getting the blessings of their parents. So the parents have brought them up to be independent, to actually know what they want. And so when they're mature enough, then they're going to make a better sort of judgment themselves, and the parents respect that because they brought them up to be able to be independent thinkers, and they respect their children enough, and their children also have that trust with their parents, so that they can come back and say, look, Mum, I know I've met someone, and you know, and this is much, and there's more chance of it working better that way when parents recognise that the needs of their children. Actually, they're not going to know what really exactly what their son or daughter would really want in a marriage. I think it's a personal thing.
But what about the fact that sometimes you need to get to know yourself, because sometimes you don't know, you might be at a certain age, and
That's
you might
an ongoing journey.
from a but you might be from a certain culture whereby if you're not married by 21, oh my God, what's happening, you're left on the shelf. So but you don't really know yourself. You're like, well, I want a person to be religious. Okay.
See,
I want a person to be blah blah blah.
When your parents choosing, making that decision for you or introducing to somebody, usually it's them. There's some sort of thought that goes behind this. You know, sometimes,
Security,
for example, yes, exactly. So sometimes, say if there is a mother, a widowed mother, or a divorced mother who's choosing spouse, who thinks, oh, I have to, make sure that my children get married, to a nice person. I hope nobody takes advantage of them, and they think of somebody and they think, oh, this will be the right person. So I think the thought that goes behind the parents, wanting you to get married to a certain
intentions.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't mean it's necessarily
the
right way.
No.
Everyone, like family members, parents always want what's best for their children, even when it comes to career. Like, no, you've got to be a doctor if you want to succeed. Why do you want to be an artist?
Exactly.
You're not going to make any money. What's
the
point? So again, it's about, yes, the intention is good, but it doesn't necessarily mean that their advice will be something that is going to benefit you.
And what's also interesting is I heard there's a program, I think it's on in America as well, where it's basically an arranged marriage, but they don't say it. They have clinical psychologists or psychologists who, there's a group of men and a group of females, and they do a match on paper on which one is, I think, what is it called?
Millionaire matchmaking.
I don't know what it's called, but basically they get married on the statistics on what are your hobbies, what do you like, and all of them have ended up in divorce. It's like you get marriage at first sight, something like that.
Maybe opposites attract. There's some truth in that, maybe.
So obviously, if arranged marriages were so bad, then why would the West be, thinking about, well, maybe arranged marriages do work? Why are they looking at?
But that's with marriages itself. I've known people that have been together 10, 15 years, they get married 4 years later, they want to get divorced,
Okay, what's wrong with that?
There's no guarantee. It doesn't matter which way, whatever way you've become introduced or how you get married, there's never ever guarantee that there's going to be kind of till the end, till death do they part.
But how do you know which one is best for you? Or which one is best for your child?
You live under one roof. No, okay, sorry.
Personally, I knew that arranged marriage would be best for me.
Because?
Honestly, I didn't have the energy. I really didn't want to go through, the route of a love marriage, and it's not that I didn't trust myself, but I knew I needed someone else who's kind of an outsider, to kind of introduce and do the initial steps. So that's what happened with me. One of my friends suggested I meet her brother, and
Mashallah.
ended up getting married.
Mashallah, alhamdulillah. But it's true, when I speak to people that are not Muslim or particular faith, because other faith groups have arranged marriages, and it's just the same as Muslims, the family introduce them. They actually say, well, you're really lucky, because the idea of dating, a lot of them find it quite psychologically damaging, because it's basically you have a pool of people to choose from, and this person says no, so the rejection, and all you want to do is settle down, whereas the other person wants to travel the world, and there's no, well, I would like to have a family and settle down, and they're saying, well, that's almost looked upon as very dated. People, men don't want to hear about that now, so they're like, oh, it's lovely that you have, you know, a community that would, you have your family behind you, a community behind you that would say, look, come here, because it takes that pressure off. And a lot of girls also say that the idea of being on the market, they don't feel quite comfortable with that, having to trawl through, you know, whoever or whatever, and letting people down slowly. So is the tradition dying out? Are we still very involved in arranged marriages, or are we too embarrassed to say the word arranged marriage because it looks like it's another taboo?
I don't think it's embarrassing. I think it's become kind of socially acceptable now, with all the different, you know, like what I was mentioning, even the matchmaking efforts that people are doing. I don't think there's like a stigma attached to it, and people have become very aware that it's different to a forced marriage. So, and I don't think it's a tradition that is dying out. I think it's becoming more and more, and like, well, a lot of my friends and even my sister's age, who are younger, like early 20s, they're looking towards having an arranged marriage instead of having a love marriage.
Because it's not a forced marriage, and people now understand that. I think that's why like you mentioned, Sarah.
And with everybody knows the statistics of divorce have been going up and stuff. So I think people are being really wary of the choices of spouses and stuff. So they've been leaving it to the elder.
But also, what is the other option? And I might sound really dumb about this, but the other option is that you find somebody for yourself, and you know, you date, and you know, you meet, and you have, you know, going out with somebody. And how is that really allowed? Are you allowed to?
But yes, it is allowed.
I don't know. I mean,
hold on a minute. There's chaperones there. Let's all calm down. If you before people get upset, you're in public places. You know, if you're never been married before, you can take a chaperone with you and be in public, and it's fine with your parents' permission, etc. And if you're older,
that's what I'm saying. Would your parents?
Yes.
Allow you to be seen in public with somebody, and
yes, because you
I think it's become known, like the age of this person is the age of marriage, the typical age of marriage, and they're looking. So even if there are some people that for some reason decide to be like, oh, we saw so and so with a boy, and you know,
but that's with your parents' knowledge. It's not like you were hiding and it was.
But I know what you mean. I have heard that before. Oh, how can you go out and people will see you and they'll be talking, but you. I think as long as you know, do what you feel comfortable with, and there's not breaking religious rules and stuff, then
or you can be in a coffee shop and your parents are like 5 seats down, or if you feel uncomfortable in your own home, you know, the door's open, person sits down, you discuss what.
I think we make it a lot harder for people who want to get married than it should be. Like, it should be made easy. Actually, I noticed, and I was talking to my friends about this recently, that we make it hard for young people to get married, and we make it so easy for divorce to happen, when it should be the other way around. We should make marriage easy and divorce hard. Like, we've turned our religion upside down, and that's why I think we're facing so many problems. And then you get, like, we complain, oh, why are so many young people doing temporary marriages and stuff? Well, because you're making marriage hard for them, and, you know.
And what's wrong with temporary marriages? Do we have a problem with temporary marriage?
That's a different
topic. Do you have a problem with temporary marriage?
I have no problem with temporary marriage.
Does anyone here have a problem with temporary marriage? No, but I think it's a tricky one, because, like you said, sometimes you go out with somebody and, you know, it's all how
And that's when the temporary marriage does come in handy, because then you're temporary married for that time,
yes,
then you
you
learn
learn
more
more
about
and
it.
then what happens is everyone starts talking about you in certain communities, like, you're
But
in
you
a
just
temporary
said,
marriage.
if you're married, if your parents are happy with it and you're happy with it, then who cares?
But some people do, Kenisha. They'll be imagining things that have happened while you've just had a coffee with somebody, and it's like, okay,
But then
so
that's
I
their
couldn't
own-
find a chaperone. Can I
But
have a
some people
temporary
don't have a
marriage when I
chaperone.
could have a coffee?
It's not necessarily something you need a chaperone. I think people, we're living in a different society right now. It's very open, and people, I mean, at the end of the day, I think we have a lot more understanding of the fact that, say you're in an open space, you're meeting for coffee, whatever, you can get to know someone that way, and yes, it's it's a meeting that's arranged perhaps just to see, just to have a conversation, to just see the communication, you know.
And it's very much like if
There's
you
nothing wrong
say,
with that.
it's the same as if you had somebody at work that you liked and you wanted to get married to them, and you're spending that time, instead of being in a public place with a chaperone, you're spending that time to go them,
Yeah.
get to know them even better at work,
Yeah.
you know.
But, you know, we've got to be mindful of cultural and geographical locations. Obviously, if you're living in a culture in
Yes.
Iran and Iraq, there's no way that this would be happening. I'm
So you
talking
would say? So you would say?
allegedly, but
Everything happens everywhere.
Yes, exactly.
yes, but some people want to pretend it doesn't. So, but
But then
in
that's the
English,
reality that it does happen, and the fact is, like you're mentioning, going back to marriages, to you know, arranged marriages. You know, there is it's similar. It's just getting your parents. Well, your parents actually selecting somebody, aren't they, to come to meet, and so you meet that person, and you can say no if you want. So then, in that sense, it's it doesn't really matter. I don't see how it's not becoming something. I think it's less popular these days, but it depends what family and what culture they're coming from.
I think there's a resurgence. Yes, that is the word. Resurgence of the need for arranged marriages, because what I think, which is natural for human behaviour, you've tried this method, okay, that doesn't work 100%. You tried another method. So I think people are trying to find a way that.
Yeah.
But Ruby, what do you mean by that? Does it mean if it didn't work out that it was to do with the way they were introduced? I really
No, I
don't
don't
think
mean
it is.
about arranged marriages. I mean,
Just
some
how-
people would say, you know, you should meet someone organically, like if you're on a bus or something, and like
It might have
people have
worked
done-
out for somebody, and for someone it doesn't.
Yeah.
Just the same as someone has a bad experience with, you know, like being in, you know, like having an arranged marriage, and then some people have a good experience. It's got absolutely nothing
No,
to do with
definitely.
that.
I agree with you, but I'm saying the fact that the media has now picked up on this. Let's psychologically evaluate each other and see if there's a good match. There's
also
obviously
more
something
times-
positive in an arranged marriage that they're seeing maybe does work. Let's
And
see.
if a marriage does not work out, and if it is an arranged marriage, usually the blame goes, oh, because it was an arranged marriage, it didn't.
Anyway, regardless of how people are introduced, I think there needs to be more education and people becoming more in tune with their deen, with the fact that we're living to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That way there's perhaps much more confidence in whatever way that people are going to be introduced, and marriage should be blessed, inshallah.
I think that's a really important choice, because with a lot of young girls, because there does seem to be a shortage of males, and they're almost like, I need to hurry up, I'm going to get left, and I'm into 50 weddings, and what about me? That they forget what are you bringing to a marriage?
Yeah.
What do you have to bring, and why are you doing it? It's not just about, oh, I found my one, I'm going to put my claws in him, like you said. It's about hopefully completing half of your team, if that's the right person. But again, we need education on that too. What about in schools? I know with my son's school there is a big push. So if you feel that somebody is going to possibly be in an arranged marriage, then do let us know. You're in education. How do they see it? How is it being treated in schools?
So I've just started with my new year 7s, and we're talking about how you can be there for each other, and you know, if you feel that there is somebody's, you know, you feel somebody's under threat with anything, and one of them was that they are, you know, forced into doing something. But I think children that young are too, you know, they don't really understand what it is, and even if it came to them, I don't know if they'd be able to tell that that's what's happening.
Because I remember in my school there was a girl, and she was actually Turkish, that she was going to Turkey like she did every holiday, and I think she was like 15, 16, she never came back to school, and we knew that she had gotten married but we didn't know what to make of it because we were thinking, oh, that's so cute, she's met somebody. But she never came back, and during that time we didn't have, schools weren't involved in, are you concerned that you're being married? And then I met her years later, and she was so miserable. She was like, I wish one of you would have tried to contact me. And this is, we didn't have internet back then, I'm that old. We had letters and stuff. But she was like, I wish one of you had, you know, said something, or maybe told the head that this was happening, and maybe they would have done something.
That's
And she has children
though,
now.
I think there should be a distinct recognition of the difference between, because I was actually mistaking that as well initially, that, you know, an arranged marriage is a forced marriage, and I think that is the kind of misconception here. And perhaps, like you said, with why Sarah mentioned that, you know, it's no problem, you know, arranged marriages are quite, you know, there's no problem with it, and everyone's pretty much, you know, accepting of it, purely because I think people have looked into it and realised it is just instruction, and you're not forced, it's a choice. And if it's a choice, then people have no other choice than to respect that decision.
Yeah.
But what I have an issue is I don't know, if your parents have this idea that I've introduced someone to you and you're going to marry them and you don't have a say in it, especially if you're young, because you don't want to necessarily upset your mum. I know that, you know, from experience, that, you know, you want to make your mum happy, and you want to make, you know, be seen as the good girl, but you're like, this isn't really what I want to do, and you don't want to deal with the fallout, and you don't want to deal with the perception that, okay, it might work out, it might not, and that's a lot of pressure. And I think a lot of girls, we don't talk about it, that we go through something because we want to make our parents happy and be validated, and it's not necessarily because we want to do it.
But then I think that the responsibility in that situation falls on the parents' shoulders. That they are obviously aware, although they should be aware, that a nikah can't be forced. One of the conditions of a nikah is that the bride is fully happy and gives full consent that this is, you know.
How can you be fully happy and give your full consent if you don't know the person from Adam?
But that's what I mean. If that breaks,
and during the nikah, that girl is actually giving the consent because she's under that pressure.
No, but that means the consent is not there. If something is forced, even as something as big as,
how can you tell?
It's an oppression, but that's why you, like you mentioned, the girl that later on she was so miserable because she was forced into something and she didn't have much of a choice, and obviously she just disappeared, and that's why she wasn't excited she was getting married. She just literally went away and got married, and nobody knew about it. That's something quite worrying, really. That's not something you could say would be even acceptable in Islam. Like Sarah mentioned, we're ignoring this. We're prioritising culture over Islamic culture because we're dismissing that and thinking about how to please the community. Even we know all these cases of many practices that go against you know, human dignity in many ways, but we still support it if we're so strong in our culture that it actually contradicts Islamic values. So we've got to focus and actually re-educate ourselves and understand that we should only be speaking on, if we're talking on an Islamic perspective, then it's going to be one that will lead us to progression as a humanity. And that's what we should be focusing on.
This girl, she was in high school, probably about 16, 17, or maybe even younger actually, and she was forced into a nikah. She really didn't want to do it. She didn't know the groom or anything. The next day she decided she wanted to call it off, so she told her parents, and somehow through a long process of many months it was called off, and they got an Islamic divorce. But this is like maybe almost 10 years ago, or more than 10 years ago. More than 10 years ago, and she still has the stigma attached to her. That she ruined her family's reputation and she's still not married. Even though Islamically she has done nothing wrong, she's the one that was being the victim, she's been oppressed. But it's like, oh, you should have got on with it, you know, you gave your word and now you've broken your word. So I think it's our mentality needs to change.
That's the strength to do something about it. I don't know, can girls not have the strength to do something about it before they get into the marriage? Why the strength after?
With this girl, I can only talk about what I've seen, is that it was literally given to her on the day of the nikah. She was told it was going to happen, and that's it. Like, she didn't know there was a lead up to it or anything, and it was like, it was promised from years before that her and her cousin would be for each other. But I know what you I understand what you mean, that you should be clear from the beginning.
No,
like, as in, I'm not thinking about it, I'm not considering it, it's no, and that's it.
It's
But
a disappointment, and it's also sometimes you want to give the impression that you've tried and that you've tried to make everybody happy here, and it's only afterwards when you're like, I really cannot start, I can't do it.
You're going to be
Which
living
can
your
be
life with
more.
that person, you know.
You're
You can,
really young.
yeah, you can do so much to please your husband, your parents and your father, but if you're the one that's going to be living with your husband, or the husband living, they need to be happy with each other, you know. How can you it's like condemning yourself to live with someone that you're not happy with, and this is going to be the father or the mother to your children. You need.
I think we've talked about abuse in a previous show about sort of, you know, domestic abuse, and it could be, we referred to the, you know, it could be a spouse, but actually a lot of the time it stems from parents that abuse their children in the sense that they put so much pressure, force them, whether it's you know, they'll disown them even if like they're going to like even study something that they don't agree. They're like, if you don't get an education, you're not my son, you're not my daughter. And this kind of pressure, it doesn't benefit anyone in the end of the day. This whole thing about you know, the honour and the family being and having a reputation, but really our true reputation stands with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We really need to be true to ourselves. What does that mean? To be true to ourselves. And Allah says, yeah, you respect your parents, but if they ask you to do something that goes against your fitra, against you shouldn't do it. That's the thing, really. But as children, like we mentioned, if you're brought up in that environment, it's very, very hard, it's very difficult, almost impossible to suddenly say, no, I'm not going to do this, and I'm...
If you obey your parents on every single thing, and then there's this massive thing
it's
that you're made to think everybody's watching
it's
you,
your
the whole
security.
community's looking at you, so you need to behave appropriately. You don't have the heart to go against the parents, and that massive.
And not only here, it is also the trust that you have in your parents. You feel that they're always right, and you feel that you're always, maybe not always, but maybe in this thing that you trust them more than yourself.
I hope we've given you a lot to think about. Do have this discussion in your own homes. As much as possible, we do try and produce programs that will create discussion and communications and get people to think in their own homes. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. See you on the next side. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.